نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشده ومن يعصهما فلا يضر إلا لنفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما يا أيها الذين آمنوا ادخلوا في السلم كافة ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين. Indeed, it's the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has given us this opportunity to be connected with the divine guidance in a manner that certainly we had not envisaged 1.5 years ago. Our masajids were open, and most of us, especially those who are elderly, were eager to go to the places of worship to offer their congregational prayers. But this pandemic certainly prevented many of us to reconnect with each other in the houses of congregation. Yet, we remain committed to the divine guidance and we remain committed to the congregational prayers, if not at one place, at our home, through this technology that Allah inspired us to develop and build. And certainly it is in that kind of spirit that the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remains supreme, whether it is raised from a house of worship or is raised through the technology where we are not connected with each other directly in a place. It remains the same. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everywhere. He listens to every one of us and He responds to each one of us. In the next 12 days, we, after making preparation for the month of fasting, would enter in the month of fasting, in fact, in reality. And we all have heard that message of the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. That the fasting has been decreed to you the same way it was decreed to the people who came before you, so that you could attain taqwa. So it is a divine challenge to each one of us. And the challenge is simple. Can you revisit your own lives? And based on your own analysis, determine where you find yourself in a weak spot. And then can you make an effort during this particular month to refresh your inner potential to bring you back to your real self on the basis of the divine guidance. So it's a challenge to us, a divine challenge. Can you do that? And kutiba alaykum as-siyama kama kutiba ala allazina min qablikum clearly identifies the pattern and the behavior of the previous generations who were given that kind of responsibility also, and that kind of mandate, yet they turned that into a ritual rather than an exercise in self improvement, self enhancement, and self development. How did they turn it into? The history of all religious communities who have this mandate of fasting clearly demonstrates. Emphasis is placed on how to begin and how to end. Emphasis is placed what to eat and what not to eat. Emphasis is placed whether one should drink and one should not. Emphasis is placed at what is purity in this thing or not. Emphasis is placed for all those kind of ritualistic things. Those are the methods to basically follow a pattern of life, but they are not the real purpose. The real purpose is to evaluate oneself and look at one's potential and look at one's own weaknesses, one's own strength, and they determine what needs to be done in terms of improving oneself. And how it is done? It is done to shun away from all those things that basically consume most of our time. If you look at the pattern of our lives, everyday life, you find something very interesting that there are a few areas which basically consume most of our energies. Of course, food is one. You know, morning till evening, we keep on eating, churning things, drinking. Those who can afford, those who cannot, they basically are longing for that. Most of us are engaged in talking issues that are of little relevance to our own lives, news that is coming to us from different quarters. Then sometimes we are consumed by the acts of others and their impact on our lives. Sometimes we have this kind of lustful attitude. Sometimes our eyes and our minds wander and reflect on things that are of little consequence and little importance to us. So time is consumed in things that basically are not about us but about others, or even if they are about us, they are in relation to what others say and what others do. We are consumed about our egos. We are consumed about our desires. We are consumed about our lustfulness. We are consumed about our resources. We are consumed about everything that deals with us. And in that particular situation, we sometimes find it hard to reflect on our purpose of life, the meaning of this life, the fragility of this life, and the demands that this life has from us towards the creators and towards the creation. This is what the taqwa is. That when we know who we are, when we understand what our responsibilities towards ourselves are, that our hands have certain purpose and they have certain responsibilities towards our whole body and towards others. Our eyes have that kind of responsibility. Our heart has that responsibility. Our brain has that responsibility. When we spend all the energy that God has given us in things that are of no consequence and relevance and meaning to all of us, then obviously we are not in that state of taqwa. We might say that we have fasting. We might say that we have that kind of control over our food and all those kind of things. But unless we have a total control of our entire selves, and that include our own consciousness, and that include our own desires, and that our own attitude towards ourselves and towards others, the food and control over the food does not mean much. Because remember, there are 1.6 billion people in our world who sleep hungry every day. Every day is a month of fasting, is a day of fasting for them, in that sense of the term. In fact, that itself is a realization of that consciousness. That can we in this month do things that would enable us to do something in terms of relieving those people from that kind of hunger that they have been going. Doesn't the Quran tell us, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةُ فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ أَوْ إِطْعَامٌ فِي يَوْمٍ ذِي مَذْغَبَةٍ. Do you know what is the most difficult task? It is to liberate the people who are in a state of bondage and to ensure that the people are given food when they are hungry. What is the message of the Quran? It's not what you call a beautiful sentence. It's not just a beautiful idea that people should have food. It is primarily a mandate given to those people who believe in the oneness of God, that make sure that no one should stay hungry in your world, no matter where you are. Whether it's your town, your city, your world. And when the Quran is telling us that from amongst you there should be a people who would invite people to do good and who would basically stop people from doing the evil, it is in this particular context that one of you should take the responsibility to awaken the hearts and awaken the minds of people towards the issues that the people are facing. But that consciousness would come only when we have control over our thoughts and our ideas, when we understand who we are. Our education system has primarily told us, and also our family system, and also our social constructions, have told us that we must take care of ourselves. That when we talk about others, it is socialism. When we talk about all these kind of issues, whether it's homelessness, whether it is hunger, whether it is the evil doing, all those things have nothing to do with human beings. They are socialism, they are communism, they are basically kind of philosophies that do not fit into the modern economic system and financial system. But this taqwa, this process to attain taqwa, is reminding us that we are all humans. Even though one group of people is going through this process of fasting in this particular month of Ramadan, but the responsibilities to which this fasting and this uh, what you call abstaining from food is required, is clearly preparing one to the oneness of humanity. And oneness of humanity not only in philosophical and only in sociological sense, but in the real sense that the people should have that basic dignity with them. And there are people who are going through this kind of process in order to commit themselves and remind themselves so that in the coming months they would do certain things about those issues. One of the interesting things we find in the life of the Prophet ﷺ is that he used to commit himself to itikaf. So he, during this particular month, and he would, itikaf means he would basically isolate himself from the rest of the happenings in the society for the 10 days, and for 2 years he did it for 20 days, and he would stay in the masjid, away from the family, away from the crowd and others, and basically focus on reflections with his close friends who would also join him, his companions. So obviously they would not only reflect, recite the Quran, because they were doing it every day. They would not offer extra prayers. They were doing it every day. They would not, you know, go over how the pronunciation has to be corrected, how the proper uh, construction of the sentence be understood. They were doing it already. That was the Prophet's responsibilities, teaching. يعلم الكتاب والحكمة. And then what were they doing? They were reflecting on the conditions of the community, and then they were preparing a master plan that they would implement for this particular year, in which they would tackle the issues that they have been facing. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That was taqwa of their time. So this month is given to us as part of a religious obligation to follow the divine guidance. Then we'll have to look at it in the context that we make use of this particular month to evaluate ourselves, to find out where do we need improvement in relations to our family, in relations to ourselves, in relation to our society, in relation to our issues, in relation to our times, in every sense of the term, and see how we can develop a plan to improve ourselves so that we could reap the benefit of this fasting and this exercise that we would go through this month. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. I realize that we started late, and certainly many of you may have to go back to your work, so we will be very short here. What we need to do is that take control of our own lives in this particular month and prepare a program for ourselves, each individual. You don't have to necessarily announce it to others, but if you announce, that's fine. But this is what our goal is. Our goal is to ensure that I understand, once again, what my weaknesses and my strengths are. And in what way I would help myself to overcome those weaknesses, and I would intensify efforts to make my strength stronger. And in this process, if I have to change my behavior, if I have to change my attitude, if I have to change my language, if I have to change my time schedule, I am prepared to do that. And we started from the day one. I'm not saying that we should not enjoy the cultural aspects of Ramadan where we all assemble, even though in the pandemics it's almost difficult to enjoy various cuisines and various kind of food, various kind of delicacies. But when we are doing that, we should also think about those who don't have that kind of thing. And if we are in a position to basically cut down on some of those things and then give that as part of sadaqah, part of charity, part of zakat to those people, let's do that. It, doesn't matter whether it is a small amount or a big amount, as long as it's, if you find that there are groups who are working for Islam and then definitely they need our support reports, let's do that also. But the emphasis should be on how to improve ourselves and our attitude and our behavior. Once we do that, then definitely this month would have a meaning for us. Because we would then be on part. Because remember, consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would come only when you become conscious of your own strength and your own weaknesses and your own self. When he says that God is closer to us through our jugular veins, means that he is closer to us. He is in us. Not in the physical sense, but in the sense that every part of our body must remind ourselves of his existence. And when it reminds us of his existence, it must convince us that whatever he has asked us in terms of actions and in terms of a belief system, we must devote ourselves to that. So let us start with this pledge that inshallah this month of fasting would give us yet one more opportunity to ensure that we become conscious of ourselves in order to become God conscious and in order to fulfill the purpose of our existence and the meaning of the life that divine guidance has given us. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون ولذكر الله تعالى